Hello here, I'm back. Sorry, I'm gonna say that a little bit, but working stuff. Let's continue. I do not know where we left off specifically this episode. Wait, I can check though? That's gonna be too much work.
Proofread by 3D Phantom. Chapter 54, Beach Views and Promises. The car stopped outside the gate to Izuku's house. As soon as they got out of the car there were thuds, rustling and shouts coming from the yard. Get him. Ugh. Don't let go. Hitachi shouted. I am trying. Ack. Have to get him down. Izuku pushed the gate open and looked around. It wasn't difficult to find a mess of purple, red, and black waving in the air in one mess. Hitachi and
Found it. I'm having it. I don't see it on my thing on here.
Tokoyami had managed to catch Eijiro, literally jumping on him, or at least hanging from his arms trying to pull him down. They were both bruised, with a big nasty one on Hitachi's cheek, crass and dirt on both their shirts. Eijiro, despite two classmates hanging from him, was still standing. He looked so tense it was a miracle his quirk hadn't activated. He was pressing his lips together with a determined stare on his face as he took a step forward, trying to shake off his unwanted baggage. Hitachi's and Tokoyama's feet occasionally left the ground in the struggle. Legs, get the legs. Hitachi shouted and twisted his own leg around Eijiro's, trying to trip him. That seemed to finally do the trick as Eijiro stumbled and lost his balance. Yes. Hitachi cheered. Eijiro bent his other leg and shifted his weight so he fell, but fell backwards. No. Hitachi's tone changed. No, 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 ugh. He didn't appreciate being a pillow to soften Eijiro's landing as the redhead fell on his back. Heh, that was pretty good, Eijiro said and tried to move his arm to get up. Hey. Despite the impact neither Hitachi nor Tokoyami had let go of his arms and were squeezing onto them even harder than before, if that was possible. Eijiro started struggling to get off. He tried to elbow Hitachi's stomach but without much space to gain momentum even he couldn't generate enough force to make such a determined opponent give up, even as roughed up as he already was. Just give up, Hitachi demanded. No, I never give up. That's not manly, Eijiro declared and tensed again. Hitachi's back actually rose off the ground briefly but he did not let go. Izuku couldn't help but chuckle at the battle of wills. Three heads turned towards him. I think you should give them this one Izuku told Eijiro. Not sure which side I would bet on for an obstinate contest here, but it isn't the best use of our time. Oh, okay, Eijiro stopped struggling. Tokoyami, Izuku said. Reluctantly the duo let go, though they seemed relieved when Eijiro got up, removing his weight from on top of them. He bounced up and immediately stretched a wide smile on his lips. That was great. I wish we could try again right away. Where do you get your energy from? Izuku asked. Eijiro looked confused. Food. Hitachi, still laying on the ground, laughed until he started gasping. You must have eaten more than I realized then. Eijiro offered his hands to help the two up. Tokoyami winced as he scrambled up. Is this how you train every weekend? Pretty much, Hitachi said and rubbed his cheek, grimacing as he did, though I'm starting to feel Eijiro has been holding back on me more than I thought. Oh, Eijiro muttered, I tried to watch for the head and avoid throwing you too hard since we aren't at the beach yet. You can tell us about it during lunch. Everyone gets their full portion. Unless you think you can still keep going on your breakfast. Hitachi looked away, but Izuku caught the look of embarrassment before he did. Yeah, about that, Hitachi muttered. Remember yesterday when you told us not to eat too much before fights? Yes. Well, Eijiro might have punched the breakfast out of me. Also, we'll need to clean your yard a bit, over there. He waved his hand towards the other side of the front yard. Oh. I said I was sorry, Eijiro grumbled, head down. Don't be. I ate too much, and it isn't like I wasn't trying to do the same to you. Pretty sure I ate more than you, Eijiro snickered. Yes, but you seem to have an iron stomach, Hitachi shot back, then shook his hand and muttered, in more ways than one. Izuku just shook his head and opened a food delivery app. Let's get inside and have a break while waiting for the food. Since I missed on getting seconds with yesterday's steak, I think I'll go with that, but not too much. That is great, Eijiro said as they started walking to the door. How did things go with you? Izuku took a moment to respond. It got more complicated than I expected, he glanced at Tinya. Seems we are dealing with more than one set of parents that could cause issues. Not everyone is as accepting as Toshi's parents. Now Hitachi too looked at Tinya, but after the first glance turned to stare at him again. Tinya, he said. What is that poking from your arm? Tinya raised his arm, making the new engine exhaust more visible. He lost his ability to speak after the first word. It's Tensei, I mean Ingenium's quirk, Izuku said. That's what he wanted me there for. I should have realized, Hitachi nodded slightly. So, at least your brother doesn't mind, well, Izuku. No, thankfully not, Tinya said. But your parents. Hitachi paused as Tinya's eyes got darker. I see. That sucks, Eijiro verbalized their collective feelings. People really keep hating on you, Midobro. It's nothing surprising, Izuku said as he opened the door. If anything, I've been unusually lucky with people I've met in the past few weeks and months. It would be unrealistic to expect that families of every decent person I meet would be just as good. Yeah, Eijiro said more quietly and looked down. Izuku got the message. Yours too. Well, it hasn't been too bad, but they have been telling me to be careful ever since those reporters started talking about you as a quirk stealer, and I'm not sure they know I've trained with you specifically during these weekends. I might not have been too specific on that. My parents have also encouraged me to be careful, Tokoyami said, but they also know how people can judge others based on their quirks. I hope they aren't causing you trouble, Izuku said. Dark shadow popped out of Tokoyama's back. I told them you are cool. They are no problem. Tokoyami sighed. He is telling the truth. Dark shadow is so protective, my parents stopped worrying when he accepted you being around me. They know Fumi is safe as long as he is with me. Which is always, Izuku added. He smiled a bit, day and night with no sleep. That's right. Dark Shadow declared. Tokoyami kept glancing between him and Izuku, confused at what he was missing. They gathered at the living room. Izuku retrieved and tossed Hitachi and Tokoyami some disinfectant and salve to help with bruises and scratches. Then he sat next to Todoroki, who was sitting quietly, staring at the turned-off TV. He had his emotionless cold stare on his face, still refusing to show emotion or weakness. Izuku looked at Eijiro, who was stretching behind the sofa. Their eyes met and Izuku nodded toward their dual-colored friend. Todoroki's head popped up as he suddenly found himself trapped between a rock and a hard place once again. At first he jolted a bit, leaning forward to get some more space, but eventually settled back against the backrest despite Izuku and Eijiro having left not much space. They sat there in silence for a moment as Todoroki settled down, and Izuku was confident that Todoroki was feeling secure. Last thing Izuku wanted was for him to close up or lash out again, or get angry and demand to be left alone. Thankfully Izuku had a secret weapon to counter that. "Hey," Eijiro said, targeting Todoroki with his smile, "did you manage to meet your mom?" Todoroki seemed to shrink between them, but at the same time managed to lean more on them. "Yes. She still looks just like I remembered, except, not so loud." Todoroki paused. "The place wasn't as bad as I thought it would be." "That's great," Eijiro kept talking with contagious excitement. "I bet she was really happy to see you." "Yes," Todoroki said. He stared forward for a long, silent moment. His head dropped on his hands and he wailed as the mask shattered. Eijiro opened his mouth to say something, but this time Izuku raised his hand to silence the redhead before putting it on Todoroki's back. Todoroki didn't as much as shake from the touch, which was progress. Izuku and Eijiro waited as Todoroki calmed down. Everyone else sat quietly and didn't interrupt. "She was so happy. I should have. All these years we could have, all the time we lost." "But you aren't losing anymore," Izuku said. "She's still there." "Yes," Todoroki sniffed. "Thank you. Before I wasn't going to see her, maybe ever. I could have lost her and not even noticed." "Possibly," Izuku said. "All these years, I wish I could give them back to her." "Yeah," Eijiro said, "that might be too much even for someone as strong as you." "It is too much for anyone," Izuku corrected. "The real question is what you can do for her future." I want to get her out of that place." "She isn't sick. She's just another victim of his." "Then," Izuku said, "you have to tell people that." Todoroki finally raised his head. Tears dotted the unburned side of his face. Izuku met his eyes, trying to keep a stern gaze of his own. "We already need to get you away from Endeavor, but to do that you will need to share what he has done. I could give them a glimpse of what he is really like, but I can't do the rest for you. I know you are hesitant, especially in public, but if you can't do it for yourself, you should do it for your mother." Todoroki drew a shaky breath. "I'll do it. I mean, I have to do it." "You are still afraid of what Endeavor might do?" Todoroki nodded his head, struggling to say it out loud. Izuku squeezed his shoulder. "Don't be. After yesterday he has to watch his every step to avoid staining his reputation anymore, and I doubt he is welcome at UA either. Of course, you can stay here as long as you need to." Todoroki nodded again. His hand gripped Eijiro's forearm. He seemed to really squeeze it like his life depended on it, but Eijiro didn't show any sign of discomfort. Izuku gave Todoroki a soft smile, even if he couldn't compete with the redhead on the other side. "If something goes wrong you can always stand behind EI. It worked fine for me just yesterday." Eijiro smirked. "Yeah. No one gets hurt behind me. That is the kind of hero I want to be." Eijiro's smile started slowly having the desired impact as Todoroki's lips tilted upwards. "Must be already," he said, and then got a darker look again. "I'm sorry." "For what?" Eijiro asked. "For being so rude at school all this time. It was easier to stay alone." "Hey, that's okay. You've been having hard time and tried to manage it the only way you knew. You just needed someone to help you a bit even if you didn't ask. I heard Midobro was like that before, and now we're all here. I like it here." "Heh, me too." "Good. So you don't need to be afraid of anything," Izuku interrupted. If you remember that you can do everything you need to be free. Todoroki looked into the empty air again, but this time his face wasn't just a mask with a dark undertone. Izuku exchanged glances with Eijiro. The doorbell rang. That must be the food, Hitachi commented. Yeah. Eijiro shouted excitedly and raised his arms into the air. Todoroki shook, startled, and Izuku could hear a wave of heat coming from him, but it disappeared as soon as it happened. Then he was just smiling, looking at his excited classmate. You must have really gotten hungry after all that training, Todoroki commented as Izuku got up to head for the door. Yep, always do. Izuku was happy to leave them chatting as he went to receive the food. Tinya, reliable as ever, showed up to help him carry it all inside. As they laid out the portions on the table, Todoroki and Eijiro joined them, the latter salivating like Izuku after seeing their quirks in action. Izuku pushed a plate in front of him, taking a moment to enjoy the look of pure happiness. It was just as satisfying as giving Hitachi a great cup of coffee. Dark Shadow stretched over the table to pick up Tokoyama's portion as Tinya and Hitachi sat next to Izuku. Izuku didn't start eating right away, instead looking around the table that had never been so full. Dark Shadow hovered over an annoyed Tokoyami, commenting about the food. Hitachi couldn't help brushing his bruises even knowing it would hurt. Tinya scratched his new exhausts every few bites and Todoroki too was adjusting to the group. He took it upon himself to distribute the bottles of drinks that came with the food and, man, you couldn't get drinks that cold in any restaurant. The food itself was great and Eijiro's face got only brighter the moment he took the first bite. After taking his, Izuku understood why. If Izuku had a quirk to stop the passage of time, he might have used it right here. Unfortunately he didn't have one, and all too soon the lunch was over. Eijiro leaned back and patted his stomach. Ah, that was good. Truly, there was nothing dark about the food, Tokoyami said. May I ask what we are going to do next? There was talk about going to a beach. Yes, Izuku confirmed, holding one finger up. Many types of training we have done include at least the risk of falling on the ground hard enough that it can be dangerous, so we train at the beach to fall in the water instead, or at least soft sand. I would have broken a ton of bones if I tried to train using my jets here. The water resistance also makes moving in it more difficult, so some types of training are more efficient. There was a study, mutter. Izuku only shut up when Hitachi elbowed him. Anyway. We can get going as soon as you are ready. We don't have swimming trunks, Todoroki said, didn't know I'd need them when going to the sports festival. Nope, unless Midobro already got some ready. I only brought my school uniform and these sports clothes. Well, no, Izuku said, not yet. A car trip and shopping stop later they arrived at the beach club. Tokoyami and Dark Shadow stared at the place in awe. Todoroki just glanced around, then focused on Eijiro's explanation of all the training they could do there. He was too busy with his explanation to spot a pink figure lounging at the terrace with a view of the beach. They quickly got changed and went to the area separated for their use. The number of people on the beach had grown a bit since the first time they had come a few weeks earlier. Staff had to drive away some random beachgoers that crossed the lines erected to mark their area. So what do you think? Hitachi asked the first-timers. Most impressive, Tokoyami said. It's nice, even if there are more people than at our beach house, Todoroki said. Are you sure it is okay with all of them here? Izuku looked at the sand around their feet. I thought about that, Izuku said. It might be safer to stay hidden, but I don't want to just lock you inside for an indefinite period of time. If we're lucky, people seeing you okay and happy without him might help our case. Still, tell me if you are feeling uncomfortable and we'll get you out of sight to somewhere safe. It's okay. I'm happy here. Great, Eijiro said and stepped closer. Wanna fight me in the water? Unless you had other plans. Eijiro looked at Izuku. No, I think that works fine. Just remember, no quirks. Wouldn't want to freeze people in the water. Oh, and yeah. Remember, this is meant to improve both your skills, not just toss people around. Todoroki has trained hard, but his usual style doesn't include close combat, so you'll be at an advantage. I already feel sorry for Todoroki, Hitachi commented. You can change places with him if you want. Izuku smirked. No, I'm fine. Hey Tokoyami, wanna train with me? You can teach him self-control using your quirk, but Dark Shadow needs to stay out of it. Okay, the quirk agreed. The sun is too bright anyway. They waded into the water to start their training, all except Izuku and Tinya. Izuku waited a moment in silence, watching as the others started sparring. Todoroki held his own better than Izuku had expected, even though Eijiro still managed to claim the first win, making Todoroki drink seawater. A few meters away, Hitachi got to enjoy success he rarely got to taste as he pushed Tokoyami down. Finally Izuku decided he couldn't delay any longer. Are you ready to try them? He asked. No, Tinya responded, but do I have a choice? Always, just as you did at the hospital, but you can help people better if you learn to use them. You are right, of course. I try. It is probably best to train using it alone before trying to combine both of your quirks. You know better than me how your brother used the quirk. The basic concept is the same as with my engines. The difference is the location. They can provide thrust to move faster but aren't as well suited for straight running as mine. In exchange they are much more maneuverable. Tensei could easily hop up walls, for example, by controlling the direction of thrust. Though he still had a lot of trouble stopping or turning quickly when he got to speed. Seems to run in the family, little T. Tinya sighed. It took less than a minute for him to fly headfirst into the sea, but with a few more tries it was obvious that he at least wasn't as bad as Izuku had been with his jets. Now they took a dive about equally as often, that is until Izuku instructed Tinya to practice jumping and using the new quirk to extend his leap with just a short burst, like Izuku had already learned to do with his jets. Gradually Tinya's leaps got a little steadier, though he still couldn't accurately control where he'd land with a giant splash. Later he and Izuku waded out of the water at the same time following two such splashes. Would you like to try something else for a change? Izuku asked. What are you thinking? Punching. You already know how to use your original engines to launch more powerful kicks. You need to be a bit cautious, but I bet you could punch several times harder. Just, be careful so you don't end up like that drill guy from Class B did fighting EI. Yes, I would prefer to avoid that. So I will simply punch air instead. Izuku smirked. Probably safest to start like that, but that doesn't mean you couldn't utilize our resident unbreakable punching bag if we figure out how to keep your hand from breaking. It'll just help his own training. Are you talking about me? Eijiro asked, having gotten out of the water next to them. Yes, how are you doing? Izuku said. Fine, Todoroki is tougher than I thought even without his quirk. We just took a little break so he could go visit the bathroom. Punched his lunch out of him already? Izuku teased. Eijiro stared back. No, I don't think so, I hope, he said and turned to look towards the club building. Izuku tapped his shoulder. Relax. I am just teasing you since Toshi is too busy to do it. Oh, Eijiro shrugged, but still glanced towards the building, then did it for the third time. Hey, does that look like Mina? Izuku tried to hide his smile as Eijiro finally noticed their classmate. She had really put the guest pass Izuku emailed her to good use, even though he had only just sent it that morning. Seems like her to me, Tinya commented. Eijiro was already waving his hand. Their pink classmate dubbed behind the railing of the terrace briefly, but had to recognize she had been seen. She got up, waved back, and walked to them. She was wearing a full-body swimsuit that was one of the UA standard uniforms, with small binoculars hanging from her neck. "Hey Mina," Eijiro greeted her, "what are you doing here? Did you come to train too?" "No, just enjoying a Saturday. Thought it would be nice to relax by the beach after yesterday. I mean the weather is nice and you came to the same beach we did. What are the chances?" "Ha, yes, who would have thought? I just thought this place has nice views." She was turning redder every second, at least on her face. It was quite impressive considering her natural tone. "Oh, that's why you got those binoculars." Yes, I like to watch the ships passing by." For a moment Izuku thought about slapping Eijiro for how oblivious he was being. Then again, Mina had also been a bit creepy watching like that for so long. Izuku wondered how things would have gone if Eijiro did the same to her, except he'd consider it too unmanly to act like that. Even now she was watching his face the minority of the time. Well, there was one way to reward and punish her at the same time. "Hey," Izuku started, "since Todoroki is on a break, why don't you two go at it for a few rounds? I doubt Eijiro is anywhere near needing a break." "That's a great idea," Eijiro declared and grabbed Mina's arm. "Come on, I'll explain in the water." He started pulling her into the water. "Hey Ei," Izuku called after them, "not sure how you've been raised, but don't even think about going easy on her because she's a girl. She deserves the best opponent she can get, and it would not be manly to go any easier on her than anyone else." "You're right. I promise to fight as well as I can." "Make sure you do." He kept dragging her into the water. Tina stepped closer. "She is." "Yes, she is. I just hope Ei understands it and they figure out their relationship before her peeping goes too far." "Shouldn't we tell him?" I don't think it is that critical, at least not right now. It would be better if he finds his own feelings. You want to pretend you didn't have a role in this?" Izuku shook his head. "I only traded beach access for a favor. And sent her to wrestle the guy she can't take her eyes off of, in a swimsuit." Izuku shrugged. "It's just classmates training. If they find they enjoy it, that just makes the training better. I still feel it is inappropriate." "Maybe, but wouldn't telling Eijiro about Mina's feelings be just the same, interfering in their relationship? She should tell him herself." "I guess you are right," Tina relented. "And you call Hitachi an evil mastermind?" "I try to learn what I can from him. Seems Todoroki is coming back." Their friend had just left the club building and was walking across the part of the beach open for other visitors. A few small groups of beachgoers had just arrived and heads turned as Todoroki passed them. Unfortunately, it wasn't just girls. Several of the people seemed to be whispering to each other. At least two took their phones to take photos or video. Todoroki started walking faster. A tall young man with a large camera and long coat stepped out of the building behind him. "Oh damn it," Izuku muttered, already on the move. "Ei. Get over here. Toshi and Tokoyami too." "Shoto Todoroki." The obvious journalist called, if you had a loose definition of journalist. A paparazzi was the more accurate term. Unfortunately, he reached Todoroki first, pushing his camera so close it seemed unlikely he'd get any good pictures. "Do you have comments about accusations made against your father yesterday? Why are you here after running away from home? Is this just teenage rebellion, and when are you going back home?" Todoroki's face had fallen into the same emotionless, cool stare he had always hidden behind as long as Izuku had known him. It couldn't hide the shaking in his otherwise calm voice. "I am not going back. Leave me alone. Do you actually think you can stay on the run forever, or that the people that lured you away from your father can avoid the consequences? I am sure he'll be here as soon as the word reaches him that you are here." Calling the man paparazzi was giving him way too much credit. No, Todoroki could barely form the word and the mask on his face was beginning to fracture. He took a step, trying to get away. The idiot with the camera reached out to grab his arm. What have these people done to you to make you act so nervous? A cold front of air hit Izuku as he got within a few meters of them. The skin of Todoroki's right arm was already developing frost, causing the idiot to let go. Jolting back, he finally looked around enough to see Izuku. Hey, aren't you the... Izuku jumped between them, shoving on the man forcibly. He was tempted to practice a judo throw on the man, but had enough sense left to understand that such a violent response to words would have just made things more difficult since there were witnesses. Even the push might cause trouble, but at least it was better than having the idiot be frozen to death. The idiot stumbled back several steps, but unfortunately avoided falling on his ass. He told you to leave him alone, Izuku said, his voice even colder than the air around them. You are the quirk stealer. The idiot held up his camera, but didn't seem to be taking photographs. What are you doing with the number 2 hero's son? Wasn't it enough to hurt the public's confidence with the false accusations you made? There is something more, isn't there? Could it be you are planning to take his quirk? Izuku frowned. So is that the narrative you're planning to fabricate? Not very original. A middle school bully did it more convincingly. Also, I am pretty sure photographing people is banned on this beach. Photographs, the idiot huffed, what century are you living in? This is a live stream. So you are broadcasting your own shitty behavior of harassing people. You can try to distract people from the relevant, but the reality speaks for itself. The reality is that Endeavor is a domestic abuser, Izuku said, making sure to speak clearly towards the camera. If this idiot was going to give him a platform to speak on, he would take it even though his audience couldn't be very large. There's only your word on that. Not exactly a basis for kidnapping. Kidnapping? Izuku raised an eyebrow. He stepped out of the way of the camera and turned to gesture at Todoroki, who was standing crouched half behind Eijiro. Eijiro was standing, arms stretched in front of Todoroki like he was prepared to cover him from an attack. Tokoyami, Tinya, and Hitachi stood next to them, focused on the man who would never get past them. Does he look like someone that has been kidnapped, someone held here against his will? How often do you find kidnapped people hanging out at a private beach club, or seeking protection from the people you are accusing of kidnapping? Seeking protection from your harassment, mind you. Well, you are trying to help him with the trauma of a lifetime of abuse, of being treated like a weapon for his father's aspirations. You aren't helping. Your viewers should be ashamed for even giving you attention. You really expect people to believe that? The reality speaks for itself, Izuku parried back at him, you only need to actually watch what he is doing. Not that your belief matters. And I am not here for you. The man tried to move past Izuku, but Izuku moved sideways to block him. After a few moves back and forth, they ended up staring at each other. Izuku raised one of his hands to chest level, squeezing it in a fist. What did I say about protection from your harassment? You aren't getting a step closer to him, but please try, he said. Give me an excuse. The lanky man stood much taller than Izuku, but other than that, there was really no question about who was stronger and who would get buried headfirst in the sand if there was any physical confrontation. Something inside Izuku was screaming at him to do just that and more. As the camera slipped down from recording Izuku's face, he even gave the idiot a confident, threatening smirk, communicating just that without words. Dad would have been so proud. You are threatening me. No, I'm telling you, you are not going to get to harass Todoroki anymore, and hiding behind a camera won't change that. If anything, it might help warn others stupid enough to do that. Also, you are trespassing. Izuku glanced past the guy to the old butler of the club who just arrived with a security guard. The less than paparazzi huffed. Too bad for you. I paid to be here. Izuku's smirk widened. That doesn't mean you get to do whatever you want. Midoriya-san, is there a problem? The butler asked. Yes, this man is harassing my friend, not to mention all the school bully level accusations he's making, and streaming people on the beach without consent. Throw him out. Look who's talking, quirk stealer. If anyone deserves to be thrown out, it's you, the man interrupted. Izuku gave him a tired stare. If you want to do that, you are more than welcome to try. I could use the warm-up before taking on the red-headed guy over there. Anytime, any place, Eijiro called out. Todoroki was still sheltering by him, but had moved a bit forward to stand by Eijiro's side. Izuku reached to grab the camera, just with 2 fingers to show he wasn't trying to steal it, and turned it to show the group. Note how Todoroki prefers to stay around them rather than anywhere near this guy, or his so-called father for that matter. The idiot yanked his camera back. Let go of my camera, you thief. See everyone. He tried to take my camera. To silence me. The security guard moved to drag the idiot away, but he started struggling and a series of bony spikes pushed out of his forearm, stabbing the guard's arm. Getting away from the guard, the idiot tried to run away. Izuku crouched, ready to pounce and relent to the voice screaming at him to pound the idiot into the sand. Hey! Hitachi shouted. The idiot got so shocked he fell on his face. The impact broke the brainwashing. Ha! Hitachi shouted. What? Who? The idiot's head twisted as he looked for the source of the sounds. His eyes glazed over and he stopped as the brainwashing took over again. Izuku's shoulders slumped as he realized he wouldn't get to bury the man. Maybe if Izuku accidentally poked him with his foot just a little bit it would break the brainwashing. He glanced at the camera laying on the sand next to the idiot. In case there is actually anyone watching someone like this man, know that he is fine, only temporarily brainwashed. Take a lesson from this. Don't go around harassing people with stupid accusations. He turned around to face Hitachi, who had come closer. He's all yours. Hitachi nodded and stepped past Izuku. Get up, he commanded while Izuku walked to the rest of the group. He stopped in front of Todoroki, who seemed uncharacteristically vulnerable. Are you okay? Is he coming here? Todoroki asked quietly. I fear he might, Izuku responded. Todoroki seemed to shrink, moving closer to Eijiro and Izuku. That guy looked like the kind of person who'd contact him just to get a video of what happens. Now Todoroki was constantly glancing around, looking for danger. His eyes kept stopping on people that were watching what was going on. Izuku sighed. I hate to say this, but we should cut our training short and go back. So, you are leaving? Mina asked from behind the others. Sorry, Eijiro turned to speak to her. It really isn't good for Todoroki to stay here if people are coming for him. I guess. I was pretty shocked by what I heard yesterday. I hope you'll be okay. Izuku interrupted, make sure no one gets to him on the way to the dressing room. Don't worry about punching people's faces if you have to. I'll come soon. Have to take care of something first. Okay. They left with Tokoyami, Tinya, and Hitachi, who had told the brainwashed idiot to leave with the guard. Izuku turned to face the butler with the angry stare he had refused to show in front of the camera. He maintained a relative calmness in his voice, but it was a cold calm, the kind of voice his father might have used when threatening someone's life. Someone let that man know we were here, and others probably know by now. If you find anyone reported our presence to anyone outside the club, ban them for life and get me the names. Of course, Midoriya-san. We already have rules about respecting club members and visitors' privacy. We won't even need to return their membership dues. And make sure no paparazzi get in again. Ban anyone working in media if you have to. Yes, Midoriya-san. Thankfully no one showed up in the time they took to change clothes and get to the car. In a few minutes they drove past the idiot now walking by the road. Izuku turned towards Hitachi on the opposite side of the back seat as they passed the man. So what did you tell him to do? Nothing special. With the stream and people seeing me brainwash him, I had to skip my first 10 ideas. In the end I just had him show his ID to the security for them to alert the police and told him to walk home. How far is that? Hitachi shrugged. How should I know? I didn't ask and my quirk couldn't make him answer questions like that anyway. So, far. Do you mean my quirk or his home? Hopefully both. The drive back continued in silence for a long time after that. Todoroki even stopped glancing at the windows like Endeavor could have busted through the glass at any moment. Izuku focused on stopping himself from ranting or muttering about media. Later on Todoroki muttered something about their training to Eijiro. Hey, don't worry, Eijiro declared. The beach is nice, but we can still train at Midobro's place. Just have to be a little more careful out of water, unless... Eijiro's eyes widened and Izuku could almost see a light bulb turn on over his head. Hey, the pool in the basement is pretty big. What do you think, Midobro? You can try it in the evening, Izuku said. It's not enough for flight training, but if you want to toss someone into it... I am not sure that is wise, Tinya interrupted. It goes against all fundamental pool safety practices. So does punching and kicking people, throwing them in the sea or jumping inhumanly far using a quirk that was just implanted into you. Anyway, it's a private pool, not a public one, so training rules would be more fitting than standard ones. Tinya looked at Izuku for several seconds, hands slightly up like he was about to slash air in his usual robotic way, but couldn't counter Izuku's words. The car turned in front of Izuku's house and stopped. They got out. Speaking of punching, you said something about taking me on before? Wanna spar now? Eijiro asked. No, Izuku responded. Oh, okay. But I do need to punch something to let out steam after dealing with that guy. Oh, so what's the difference? Izuku shook his head, smiling. The others had comparable reactions. Izuku turned to face Eijiro, directly holding one fist up. Nothing. Make sure to use your quirk. I don't feel like holding back. Oh, you did not just say that. Fine, Eijiro hardened his arms, punching them together, but you have to use that new technique. Wouldn't want to break your fingers by accident. Technique. Oh, you mean this? Izuku lit his dragon blade and forced it to shrink and thicken around his fist. Yeah, what do you call it? Izuku blinked and looked at the blue shining flame-like mass around his fist. I haven't actually thought about that, maybe something like Fire Fist. I guess that is pretty descriptive, but it doesn't sound as cool as Dragon Blade. More like hot, Hitachi commented and looked at Todoroki. What do you think? I don't know. Todoroki muttered, a Hell Fist. That works, but... It sounds like something Endeavor would do, Izuku said, and people would just twist it the worst way in my case. Sorry, Todoroki muttered. Izuku was about to tell him to not be when he continued. What about Dragon Fist? I don't think he has ever used a name like that. Hey, that sounds cool, I mean hot, Eijiro agreed. You should use that. Okay, Dragon Fist it is. You ready? Izuku raised his fists in a fighting stance. Yeah, Eijiro mimicked his stance. Izuku's weight shifted ready to attack when Eijiro suddenly opened his fists and held his open hands in front of him. Wait. We should change clothes first. I don't want to ruin this too. They were all wearing their UA uniforms since, with the impromptu sleepover, the others had only brought those and their PE clothes the previous day. Izuku smiled. Probably smart. You already destroyed 2 sports shirts yesterday. You mean you destroyed one of them, Hitachi interrupted. Eijiro scratched his head with one hand, pointing at Izuku with the other. He's not wrong. They went inside and started to change, all of them. Izuku wasn't about to let the rest slack off. Then they scattered across the yard. This time Tinya trained with Todoroki as Izuku faced Eijiro next to the shattered boulder. He reformed his newly named dragon fists. Ready? Why, actually, Eijiro said and glanced towards Todoroki and Tinya, can I ask you something? Always. What happened at the beach, with that guy? The way you reacted, I felt something. I think it was the look in your eyes or something like that. Was it, what you talked about in the morning, you know, the switch? Izuku drew a deep breath and resisted looking towards their two-colored friend. I think, kind of. He wasn't attacking any one of us, not exactly, so it wasn't quite the same but. I wanted to hurt him for what he did, hurt him badly. You don't understand how close I got. So does that mean that Todoroki is also a switch like me? At least he is getting there. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Eijiro hardened and raised his arms in a defensive stance. Izuku just stood there, staring for a long moment. Don't you mind what I just said? Nope. It sounds bad, but I know you wouldn't do anything like that without a reason. The complete trust in his voice made Izuku want to cry, but his dam held and he drew a deep breath instead. I wish I could be as confident of that, he paused. If I ever go too far without a reason, promise you'll stop me. Eijiro dropped his arms and undid his quirk. Hey, I don't think that's going to happen. Izuku pleaded. Okay, he gave Izuku the most calming look and smile yet, I promise, but you have to also promise that if you feel you need to hit someone, you come to me first. Eijiro pointed at himself with his thumb. Izuku sniffed and nodded. You can start now, Eijiro hardened again. Izuku charged. He packed his negative emotions into his fist, letting them shatter against hardened skin. Favorite, story author follow, story author.
I'm really sad. There's only like 60 chapters though for this one.
Fanfiction, unleash your imagination.
But I'm glad I have other ones to do.
Proofread by 3D Phantom. Chapter 55, Dark Past Dark Future. See you tomorrow, Hitachi said as the car arrived. Yeah, Izuku agreed, a little sad like every Sunday around this time. They both turned to face Tinya, who was even tenser than usual, and that was already a lot. Izuku reached out to put his hand on Tinya's back. You have done nothing wrong. Don't let them make you think anything else. I know. It is just. I am not sure I can. It has already been hard to go against them to be here. It feels wrong. They raised you to follow their principles and obey. You always want to do everything by the book, Hitachi said. Of course, it is difficult to go against them even if they are wrong. And this was why Hitachi should have come to the hospital with Izuku and Tinya the previous day. Tinya nodded, but the gesture was empty of confidence. Call if you need us, Izuku said straight to the point. There wasn't really anything else he could offer at this point short of kidnapping Tinya, and remember you can come here anytime if you need to get away. Hitachi stepped to the side to guide Tinya into the car first. It didn't really make sense with how close Tinya lived, but at least he would be in good hands for that short trip. Izuku had half a mind to go along, but that might just spark more trouble for nothing but having to let go a little later. If they encountered Tinya's parents, Tinya would need people that could de-escalate the situation. That wasn't Izuku. Excluding Dark Shadow, everyone going into the car would handle that better than him. Izuku glanced at Eijiro, who just turned to say goodbye to Todoroki, who was standing next to him. Izuku could quite literally see as his two-faced classmate caught Eijiro's contagious smile. If Izuku hadn't used his all-for-one on Eijiro before, he would have sworn the redhead had to have a second quirk. Eijiro joined the rest in the car, leaving behind only Izuku, and Todoroki, who had moved right next to Izuku. Izuku hadn't seen him more than a few steps away from someone since the failed beach visit the previous day. When he wasn't around Izuku, he could usually be found within an arm's reach of Eijiro. Izuku had no arguments against that approach. Really helped when feeling down or unsecure. Izuku hid his sadness from his face and reached his arm over Todoroki's shoulders as they waved to the leaving car. Todoroki didn't even shudder at the touch. If anything, he leaned into it. "It is always the worst part of the week," Izuku said quietly. "How are you feeling?" "Something," Todoroki answered after a moment. "I don't like it." "Same," Izuku said and pulled gently to make both of them turn. "Come on, let's go inside." "Aren't we going to train anymore?" Todoroki asked, confused. "We can if you want. I often go to the gym after the
Okay, guys, we might have to train because I'm gonna do something during this, but guys, I'm still gonna listen, okay?
others leave, if I don't have anything else to do." By that he meant getting crushed by bioengineered monsters or going around wearing a black mask. "I don't really feel like watching movies or things like that alone anymore, so." Izuku shrugged. "Those kind of things are wastes of time that will hurt my training to become a hero," Todoroki muttered, but his words were mechanical, like he was repeating something he had memorized or been made to memorize. His voice started breaking as he whispered the last part. "Just like playing with the other kids not destined for greatness." Izuku stopped and yanked Todoroki closer. He would have stared at Todoroki, but the other's head was down, facing away from him. Izuku's voice came out as unnecessarily harsh as anger dripped into it. "Is that what Endeavor told you?" Eventually Todoroki nodded very carefully. "He told me I shouldn't let anyone stand in my way of getting stronger. That I should just ignore those who are weak and useless or push them aside. I did both." Izuku was now squeezing his free hand in a fist, focusing his anger on the free hand so as to not do the same to Todoroki's shoulder with the other. Blue sparks lit the air around the hand. He was starting to regret he'd let Eijiro leave. He really needed to hit something. He swung his free hand towards the rock Eijiro had shattered weeks ago and fired off a hellfire arrow. It hit perfectly in the hole Eijiro's fist had made to enter the rock and shatter it from the inside. Only the cling of a broken window and shouting from the neighbor made Izuku's sensible side consider that might have been what people call not smart. He'd really hear it from the gardener for this. Todoroki on the other hand had raised his head with fear creeping back on his face. Sorry, Izuku said and breathed in deep, holding his hand open in an apologetic gesture. "You are angry," Todoroki stated the obvious like it was a great revelation. "I'm angry at Endeavor, not you." "Oh," Todoroki relaxed a little under Izuku's arm. "I think I understand." "I hope so," Izuku said, calming himself down. "Leaving him behind won't help your future if you can't leave behind what he tried to make you into." "What did he make me into?" Izuku nudged him to continue moving towards the door and asked, "Do you really want to talk about this now? I mean 2 days ago you weren't exactly eager to hear what I thought." "It is okay, but, don't ask me to use his fire." "Your fire," Izuku said, unable to help himself. "Sorry." They stepped inside and went to the living room sofa. After a weekend of having it full, it felt strange to sit on it with just Todoroki and no one else around. The sofa and house didn't feel quite as empty as usual, but the difference was still sad, especially in the large room. Izuku didn't usually spend much time there when he was alone. "So, I tried to tell this to you before, but Endeavor has been making you into himself, and he was succeeding. I tried to refuse him." Izuku shook his head. "You say that, but out of everything you got from him you only tried to refuse part of your quirk, nothing more," none of what was really making you into what he wanted. Just because you resisted him in one way didn't change everything else you were doing. What you just said, about pushing weaker people aside or seeing them as useless. You have been doing that, or at least looking at other people like that, since the beginning. You think power determines a person's value, especially their quirk. Out of everything, that is the worst thing Endeavor has done to you. But you need power to be a hero, especially number one. And that's another thing, Izuku said, why do you want to be either of those things? Todoroki looked at him, mouth half open. Shouldn't I want to be a hero? He finally asked. Depends on what you think being a hero means and why you want to be one. Endeavor wants power to stand above others, worshipped by them, and doesn't care about them or really what happens to them. Unfortunately, a lot of people with strong quirks look at that and think the same. The country is full of fake heroes and people like that wanting to be heroes for those reasons. How do you know? Izuku's eyes narrowed and his voice turned colder than Todoroki's quirk. I shared a classroom with one for the past decade. It opened my eyes to what kind of people often become heroes and are blindly supported by the wider society, even at the cost of others. You aren't as loud or murderous, but you have been on the same path. Thinking, I will be the strongest, I will be the number one, I will be rich and famous, I am better and more important than you extras, so stay out of the way or you'll regret it. I. Izuku caught himself falling into a rant and snapped his mouth shut long enough for Todoroki to process the words. He lowered his head in shame. I never thought it like that. I only thought being a hero was something I was supposed to be the best at. You were told you were supposed to be, and then you wanted to be one just to show your father. How becoming exactly what he wanted was going to show him anything is something I still don't get. Todoroki remained quiet for a moment before asking, then what should I do? What do you want to do? Izuku shot back. You could well still become a hero, but the question is why? If you only do it for status or money or to show off how strong you are, you might save some people, but you will only hold up the rotten ideals as you do now. I don't know. What should I? Izuku shook his head. What do you want to do? Todoroki asked this time. Izuku's head froze still. Did I say something wrong? Todoroki sounded concerned. No, but for the question. Usually I just want to keep the people around me safe, besides that. Izuku had to stop to censor his words. I would like to change the society and how people treat each other, especially heroes. Like the whole thing I just said about what Endeavor taught you, the supposed heroic ideal he and All Might and others promote, about not so much what people should do but what they should be. So Endeavor wouldn't like it if you could do that. Most certainly not, but as despicable as he is, you shouldn't decide what you want to do based on what he doesn't like. You already made that mistake. Todoroki slumped against the backrest next to Izuku. Part of Izuku wanted to keep pushing, make Todoroki break out of the remnants of the chains that had held him, but he held back. Trying to consider what Hitachi would do, Izuku figured it would be enough if Todoroki recognized the issues he had. The rest could wait. So should I stay at UA or leave? Todoroki said, snapping Izuku out of his thoughts. Are you really asking that? Izuku asked. Todoroki nodded. I only go there because I was told to, because that was the best way to become the number one hero. So, what would you do instead? Todoroki remained quiet, barely moving as Izuku put a hand on his arm. I can understand not caring about UA as much as everyone else, but you shouldn't make a change like that when you don't even know what else you want to do. Todoroki seemed unconvinced. If he was already capable of acting, he was certainly capable of acting rashly. Izuku shouldn't have had a problem with removing a promising student from UA and the hero system, but Todoroki considering it still felt wrong for some reason. Izuku quickly tried to think about things that could convince him to at least delay such decisions. He squeezed Todoroki's arm. Do you have anyone, any friends outside of UA, besides your family, the parts that aren't rotten? Todoroki shook his head. Then you should stick to where you have people that support you, at least until you have a reason to leave. Even Eijiro might not smile if you just left. Todoroki's eyes opened a bit wider, then blinked. Izuku could understand the feeling. What he had described was difficult to imagine, but anything was possible if things got bad enough. How about we worry about getting Endeavor off your back and figure out how you are going to live from now on, before you start making any other radical changes for your future. You have to go to school somewhere anyway. Okay, Todoroki said and thought for a moment. Do you really think Kirishima would be sad if I left? I have only been cold to him for weeks and even burned him. Of course he would be, we all would, and that guy has shrugged off a lot worse than what you did to him. Izuku tried to mimic the smile he thought Eijiro would give in that situation. I should know. I threw a lot of that at him. That made Todoroki huff like he was holding back a laugh, or at least a chuckle. A lot of tension in his posture evaporated. I have always thought the best way to feel comfortable was to be alone, not with other people, Todoroki said quietly. Izuku inched a little closer. I know. It depends on the people. Finding the right ones is the difficult part. There aren't many. They didn't feel like watching a movie, so they just sat there until deciding to get a bath before going to bed. When you have a spot, you should use it. It didn't matter that Izuku hadn't kept it warm. Todoroki dipped in first and Izuku noticed the increase in steam in the room before even getting in the hot pool. After vaporizing a stadium-sized iceberg, warming one pool was nothing. Thank you, Izuku said. His mood was only soiled by Todoroki seeming to be caught off guard by the appreciating comment. He held back his wish to say something. Now that Eijiro wasn't present to cannonball into the water, they could just relax in silence before heading upstairs. Izuku stopped at the top of the stairs and looked at Todoroki. Since it's just the two of us now, you can use my bedroom if you want. You mean, alone? Yes, Izuku responded, but Todoroki's expression turned somewhere between fearful and pleading, or we can stay in the sleepover room. It's a bit full now, but not as full as last night. Okay, we both can stay there, Izuku said. It was what he preferred anyway. Though he couldn't contact his father that way. I don't want to be trouble. You aren't, come. Izuku led them to the room still full of more beds than it was ever planned to hold. Seeing them empty was a bit unfortunate, but it was only a few more hours till Monday and the room wasn't completely quiet. Todoroki rustled behind Izuku, changing clothes. They got onto the same beds next to each other they had used during the weekend, except for the new unburnt linens that Izuku had changed for his bed. Soon they were laying on the bed silently staring at the ceiling, both wary of the demons of their lives rising up with the fall of darkness. Midoriya, Todoroki whispered. Yes. Izuku responded. You said you want to change things, not just with us but the system, the whole society. Yes. Izuku responded more carefully. How? It seems impossible. I'm not sure I can even get away from one man from that system. It's not easy. The easiest thing is to help people who are better than that to succeed even when they are being pushed down. Imagine if any of us, Izuku gestured not just at the two of them but also the empty beds around them, had not gotten into UA. Whoever took those seats in the class could have been like Bakugo, or at least someone in it for the money like Uraraka, or someone like Ajiro. Is that why you help so many people train? I don't think that is enough to change anything. Not really, out of all of you only Toshi had a real risk of not being accepted if I wasn't involved, and no. It's not. I wish it was that easy, but you can't fix something that large just by helping a few people get what they deserve. It would be like trying to paint over one wall of a rotten house and point to it pretending the house is fine. Then how? Izuku pressed his lips together. Him and his big mouth. Now he had to pick his words carefully. Then again. Todoroki sounded unusually interested in Izuku's words. Maybe Endeavor had done some good showing his son the dark side of the system he represented. Izuku was tempted to test him at least. I'm not exactly sure how to do it, he only partially lied, but you can't fix a rotten house without replacing the rotten parts that keep it up. You have to take down at least the most rotten walls and build better ones. Walls. Whatever keeps things how they are, like Endeavor. Izuku glanced at Todoroki and even in the darkness thought he saw a spark of realization in his eyes. If we expose all that he has done, it will do a lot more than helping you. Exposing the number 2 hero as nothing but burning garbage won't fix the world, but it should make people at least consider what is really going on, like opening a wall to show them a spot of mold and rot on the supporting pillars. If stuff like that happens enough, something might change. People don't want to live in a rotten house, but they often don't realize they do until it is too late to fix it. Todoroki looked at him in the darkness for a long time. Wouldn't people try to stop that from happening? Of course. They already do, just think about the quirk restriction laws. They restrict most quirk use except for those who are part of the system as heroes. Isn't that just for safety so incompetent people don't hurt others with their quirks? Many people are hurt by cars. Should we ban driving for anyone who isn't hired by the government to drive and only let those people go to driving school in the first place? That doesn't seem like it would be smart. So why do the exact same thing with quirks? Everyone talks about quirks, judges people based on quirks and worship heroes for what they do with their quirks, but almost everyone can be treated as criminal for nothing more than using their quirk. If anything, that makes things more dangerous since people don't get to practice with their quirks if they don't get into a hero school. Then why? Because people with no experience in using their quirks are not much more of a threat to heroes than those with weak or no quirk. Makes heroes work easier, and helps them to stay on the top. So, everyone should be taught to use their quirks? Wouldn't that still be dangerous? You don't need to be a prodigy to use a quirk responsibly, Izuku snapped, perhaps a little too harshly, but maybe that was what it took to get Endeavor's poison out of Todoroki. Living is dangerous. You can't put people in cages just because they might be capable of doing something bad, only when they actually do it. I understand, but you cannot just change the law. No, Izuku sighed, it is not that simple. People have been taught to fear foreign quirks and trust heroes. You'd have to make people see the trouble with heroes first, like with Endeavor. Even if we could just change those laws and expose every hero, that wouldn't solve everything. The current system might be rotten, but if you just remove it, there is nothing holding back people with powerful quirks from doing a lot of harm. Izuku stopped for a moment to dwell in the darkness of his past. Todoroki kept looking at him. You are different, Todoroki finally said. Izuku's head perked up. What? He hesitated, what do you mean? Todoroki stared at him, speaking frankly and without obvious emotion. I have heard you point out many things I don't usually think about, but never like this. I didn't expect that. Sounds like you want to fight the world. It is confusing. Izuku barely breathed, thinking he'd gone too far. He had to step back. Sorry, he blurted out, I didn't mean to. I tend to think about things when trying to sleep, especially difficult things. It is not very realistic to do much about it, but I'll still help you expose Endeavor. Todoroki's expressions were difficult to read in the darkness, but he was still looking at Izuku. Izuku hoped he was just thinking about Endeavor. You are going to do more, Todoroki said. Izuku didn't breathe for a few seconds, feeling Todoroki creeping closer to his secrets. I think I want to help you, Todoroki finally said. It took Izuku a while to process. He turned to his side to better face Todoroki. I told you, you shouldn't choose what you do based on your father. I'm not. I have hated him my entire life, but I have never thought about what he might have done to other people. I never cared. You do. You get mad and shed tears for the sake of others. Todoroki left the statement hanging in the air. Izuku swallowed quietly. He started, it is nothing special. I have lived a lot of it. It is hard not to see things after you have had to experience them, like you wouldn't assume someone is a good person just because they are a famous hero. No, but I want to see the rest, Todoroki said. I still don't know if I want to be a hero, but I think I should help people somehow, like you. How can I if I don't know why they are suffering? If you try to change things, a lot of people won't appreciate you, Izuku warned, especially not like they would if you just become a hero and do what people expect. I know, but isn't that what you said is wrong with heroes anyway? Head still laying on the pillow, Izuku nodded slightly. Yeah, fake heroes at least. I'm happy there might be at least one real one in the room. I will also try to be one, at least as long as I'm at UA. Izuku didn't correct Todoroki's misunderstanding. He was too busy thinking about everything else that had just been said. Had he just recruited the so-called number 2 hero's son to join his crusade against current hero society? Okay, maybe not quite. Todoroki probably would not join the league even if it was to take down Endeavor, but still. Even Hitachi and Tinya hadn't gone that far in listening to Izuku's rants or wanting to get involved with them. Though he probably had never slipped that deep into them. Oh, Dad would love this. After they stopped talking, Todoroki's breathing soon slowed down and he drifted off to sleep surprisingly quickly. Izuku had expected Todoroki to have difficulties sleeping considering everything he had gone through, but he had done the opposite. On Saturday evening, Todoroki had dozed off before there was even time to brainwash him to sleep. Then again, Izuku slept best during the weekends too. Feeling secure could do wonders to a weary soul. Todoroki's face was facing towards Izuku and seemed more at peace than at any time in the past several weeks. Something inside Izuku demanded him to protect that peace. The last few days had been a bit of a mess, especially the sports festival, but looking at the non-symmetrical face in front of him at that moment, Izuku felt he had at least done something right. He thought he had warmed up to Eijiro quickly, who wouldn't? But now it seemed he might need to have the talk with Todoroki soon. Favorite, story author follow, story author. Fanfiction, unleash your imagination. Proofread by 3D Phantom. Chapter 56, Names, Names, Names. Izuku walked up from his home basement gym after his usual short school morning workout and shower. He felt unusually good and not in as much rush to head to school as usual. Then again, he usually had to do his Monday morning workouts alone, only meeting others as he headed out. Todoroki followed Izuku, adjusting the tie of his school uniform. Izuku glanced out of the window and picked up an umbrella just in case. The car already came. You got everything you need? No, Todoroki responded quietly, I didn't have any of my school books with me at the sports festival. You can borrow mine. I can share with Toshi or Tinya. Thank you, Todoroki responded, head down looking at the floor. Izuku moved to lightly elbow his side. He could have sworn that the air got a bit cooler as he did. Don't act like it's something you'd need to worry about, really. Your father already wants my head on a pike, borrowing books doesn't matter. Right, Todoroki said, managing to raise his chin at least. Izuku shook his head. Let's go. Just as they stepped outside, the car moved away from where it had been in front of the house, giving space to a large truck with a large crane to drive in front of Izuku's front gate. The driver got out as Izuku opened the gate. Good morning. We have a delivery to Midoriya-san, 20-ton steel cube to be installed on the ground. Yes, that's for me, Izuku responded and turned to point towards the yard. Set it up over there where there are remains of a large rock. Make sure you anchor it well into the ground. At least 1/3 should be underground and don't spare the concrete. The man didn't respond. Izuku gave him a questioning glance. The man looked hesitant. His eyes jumped between Izuku and Todoroki as his expression turned gradually more concerned. Are your parents home? The man eventually asked. No, Izuku said bluntly, and that delivery isn't for them anyway. If I need to sign something, please give it to me now. We are in bit of a rush. Well, okay. At least it is the right address, the man muttered and gave Izuku a touch screen to sign on. Todoroki looked at the large piece of steel on the back of the truck. Kirishima is going to love that, he muttered. Assuming it lasts past the first day. Izuku regretted saying that right away. Todoroki's lips had been twitching up, but now he frowned. Izuku pulled his shoulder. Don't worry about it. The world won't run out of things to punch. If nothing else you can always make him ice pillars to smash, Izuku said. Todoroki's head perked up with new light in his eyes. Oh, right. I can. Izuku mentally gave more points to Todoroki as the other boy walked to the car. His smile only disappeared for the moment when it changed into a surprised expression as he looked at the car. You got a different car. It's larger, Izuku responded. We could barely cram into the other when Tinya wasn't with us. This one works better. It sure did. The larger black car had 2 rows of back seats facing each other so they could comfortably fit half a dozen people with room to spare, and that was with everyone sitting together in the back. The driver was separated by a soundproof glass, though Izuku would not have counted on the privacy of the car. He checked his watch, concerned. Usually Tinya is already waiting here before the car comes. As Izuku raised his head he finally saw Tinya running towards them. At least he was still following the law and not using his quirk, so the feeling in Izuku's heart eased, a little bit. It was only a little bit though. Tinya slid to a halt right in front of Izuku. His face was no brighter than the sky at the moment. Sorry I'm late, we should go quickly before we are late from school. Izuku stared him straight in the eyes for a long moment. We will go, but don't try to hide what you are really worried about. Tinya's shoulders slumped and he nodded in surrender. Izuku gently guided them to sit in the middle facing forward and sat opposite them. Neither said a thing and Izuku too was hesitant to break the silence. He could only watch as Tinya was squirming in front of him to avoid his stare. Todoroki sat quietly trying to put on his traditional emotionless mask but unable to hide his concern as he too turned towards Tinya. Eventually Izuku couldn't hold back. Tinya, he asked quietly, do you still have a place for tonight? What? Oh, yes. They didn't go that far, but they tried to stop me from coming. Dad was already starting the car when I left. Sneaked out, Izuku corrected. Tinya nodded rapidly. Now they aren't just worried about what you are, but worried you are planning to kidnap me or thinking we exploited Tensei somehow. Mom even got so angry she suggested you could have had something to do with him getting hurt. Tinya glanced at his sleeve that had a slight bump from the new exhaust pipes from Tensei's quirk. I shouldn't have. Izuku's face twitched but he held his emotions off his face and reached to put his hand on Tinya's shaking hand. You didn't do anything wrong. I know, but they are my parents. They. Being your parents doesn't make them right, Todoroki muttered. If they think it does, that is even worse. Todoroki put his hand on top of Izuku's and Tinya's. He looked at it for a moment and blinked. Did I do it right? What should I do next? Izuku huffed with a smile and even Tinya didn't seem as sad. Izuku assured Todoroki he did well. A while later they stopped at a house they hadn't been to before. The car door next to Todoroki swung open before the driver could even get out to open it. Hey. Good morning. Eijiro greeted with energy that should have been illegal so early in the morning, especially since he was drenched from the rain that had started during the drive, but some of his energy seemed to radiate off him and stick with Todoroki, who responded to Eijiro's smile in kind. "Wow, did you get a new car, Midobro? It's really fancy. This seat feels as soft as my bed. And more space than the other one," Izuku added. "For sure." Eijiro leaned against the seat and laid his arms on the backrest, reaching behind Todoroki as he turned his smile assault on the two classmates next to him. "So how are you doing?" The trip continued much more cheerful than before, so much so that even Tokoyami and Dark Shadow could not cast a shadow over it when they stopped to pick them up. Finally they picked up Hitachi. As he got on, Izuku caught a glimpse of a secret security guard there in case Bakugo would try something stupid. Izuku would not have been convinced of the guard's ability to even slow down the walking arsenal on fire, but he was given the contact information of the little-known security company by his father, so. Hitachi looked around the new car, not showing even a slight surprise, but Izuku could imagine his brain already printing out some clever comments starting with something along the lines of course Izuku would. "So are you going to buy a new car every time we find people you can let close enough to share one?" Izuku didn't respond but gave up on the staring contest quickly. "Tinya," Hitachi said, "how about we'll go for a bus?" Tinya nodded and seemed to hold back a chuckle. At least he seemed better than when he had gotten to the car. "Hey Fumi," Dark Shadow said, popping out of Tokoyama's chest. There was actually enough space for him in the car. What if we get him a bus instead of a house, since he already has that? Tokoyami held his beak and sighed. With everyone present, the remaining short drive passed in much higher spirits, at least on the surface. Izuku kept a close eye on Tinya, only taking few glances at Todoroki. The two-faced classmate was doing much better than a few days ago, and Eijiro was maintaining his soft smile without needing help from Izuku. Of course he was talking about training, but that seemed to be a topic Todoroki could keep up with. As they approached the school, Izuku checked messages from his phone and directed the driver to a small side gate where Mr. Izawa was already waiting with some security robots as they got out of the car. The man looked like he had not slept since the sports festival, so a bit worse than usual. At least he didn't look like a mummy anymore. "Hey, Mr. Izawa," Eijiro nearly shouted. "Great to see you feeling better." "Thank you." The old lady went a little overboard with her treatment. "How bad is it?" Izuku asked as soon as he got out of the car. He could feel Tinya's critique about politeness, but if someone in this school understood going straight to the point, it was Mr. Izawa. There aren't significantly more reporters than after USJ, but now there are also protesters among them and a couple of counter-protesters. Izawa rubbed his forehead. "And then there are several girls who really should be in school at this time, their own school." Izuku tilted his head, the question in his eyes. A group of hero students got live streamed to thousands of people, at a beach. Some people care more about what they saw than what was said. "Oh," Izuku said after a few seconds. "What do you mean?" Todoroki asked, seeming confused. That was until Hitachi leaned in closer to whisper something to him. Todoroki blushed visibly, making both sides of his face seem a bit more even, and Izuku could have sworn the air got warmer. "I guess Ashido wasn't the only one enjoying the view," Izuku said. What do you mean?" Eijiro asked this time. Izuku realized his mistake while Izawa had a question in his glare, but in the end only sighed. "Get in the class. You are going to be late." Izuku started leading their group towards the building, only remembering Eijiro a moment too late. Hitachi was already whispering to the boy whose cheeks were starting to look like his hair. Well, even if he didn't figure it out on his own, he could have gotten it in a worse way than being told by Hitachi. If anything, Hitachi thinking it was okay to tell meant it probably was the best option. Eijiro continued blushing and glancing towards Ashido throughout the morning lessons, and during lunch ended up sharing a small table with the girl. Izuku couldn't help but feel something was missing despite still being surrounded by a large group for lunch. Todoroki was sitting securely against the wall opposite to him between Tokoyami and Hitachi. Tinya sat next to Izuku, with sadly empty seat on Izuku's other side, at least empty for a moment. "Hey, Shoji," Hitachi called to their large classmate who was passing by. He sat down next to Izuku. A tentacle mouth rose, facing Tinya. "My condolences, how is your brother doing?" Tinya's face turned darker, and he rubbed the back of his arm and the exhaust hidden in his sleeves. "He is going to live," Tinya paused, "but not walk." "I am sorry to hear that." Shoji followed Tinya's movements to his arm. "Have you two been hurt?" "I heard Kirihime talking about something he called hardcore training." "It is not that," Tinya said and swallowed. Well. Izuku, could you?" Izuku nodded slowly. "Tinya's brother had me pass his quirk to Tinya." Shoji made more eyes to stare at the both of them at the same time, but remained silent. "It is a bit of a sensitive subject," Izuku added. Shoji nodded in understanding, and no one talked for a while. Eventually Izuku sensed the tension in the air. You don't need to be worried about talking," he added. "Actually, can I ask something?" "Of course." "Did you see what was happening at the main gate? What were people saying?" Shoji thought about his response for a moment. "Many people claimed they were here for Todoroki in one way or another, but I heard more anger and hate than worry in their voices." Shoji waved 3 ears in front of Izuku. "Seems many of them are more angry that you made accusations against Endeavor than what you accused him of." "Not surprising. A few appeared to even hide knives and other weapons under their clothes. I reported them to the security. I wish I could say that is surprising. Some tried to argue with them though, but not many. There was almost an altercation when some of them got mocked for mutant-type quirks, but Midnight handled it." Izuku nodded. Shoji paused for a moment. "There were also a few girls that talked about some hot bad boy, one with white hair. Some of the things they talked about aren't necessarily appropriate to say here out loud." Izuku rubbed his forehead and prepared mentally at seeing Hitachi's expression change. "See, not everyone hates you," Hitachi said. "Didn't you want people to pay attention to you, not just your quirk, positive attention that is?" Izuku frowned. "I'd prefer people who pay attention even when I have shirt on." "You should take it as a compliment," Hitachi said. "Lot of guys can only dream about getting attention like that." Izuku sighed. Izuku's frown and Hitachi's smirk lasted for a while as Hitachi continued his verbal jabs, but listening to them made the others relax from the previous discussion, so in the end it was a net positive well worth the frowns. Izuku let Hitachi run the show until they finished lunch, and Hitachi provoked Tinya into talking about their studies as a new distraction. After lunch it was time for the hero training. Izuku was already expecting them to go through their performance at the school festival or something like that. It would be logical to take advantage of those contests when the events were still relatively fresh in their memory. Izuku arrived exactly on time as Izuku went through the motions expected of class president at the beginning of the class. "We are having a special hero informatics class today," the man started. The mood in the room collapsed instantly as people expected a quiz or lecture or things like that, as if they were in a school or something. "Code names," Izuku said. "You'll be coming up with hero names. We're gonna do something exciting." Several people shouted basically the same thing, raising their arms like an excited audience at a sports competition. A single red glowing stare silenced them, and suddenly everyone was sitting quietly, their backs straight like nothing had happened. Izuku continued speaking as the red glow of erasure disappeared. "This is related to the pro hero draft picks. The drafts begin in earnest in the second and third years, after students have gained experience and can become immediate assets to the pros. In other words, for them to extend offers to first years like you shows that they are interested in your future potential. These offers are often cancelled if that interest dies down by graduation. So we'll have to prove ourselves once we get picked, huh? Hagakure, the invisible girl, asked. That's right, Aizawa nodded and raised a hand with a remote control, and here are the totals for those with offers. A big bar chart appeared on the screen that covered most of the wall behind Aizawa. There was one bar way ahead of everyone else representing thousands of offers for Todoroki, followed by far smaller but respectable numbers near 1,000 for Tinya, Tokoyami, and Eijiro. Izuku started getting concerned reading down the list, but Hitachi too was also solidly in the 3 digits. A sliver of regret Izuku felt for the beatdown he had given Hitachi slipped away. At least some had seen his ability and potential, or at least that of his quirk. As the list continued to lower numbers, Izuku realized he had yet to see his own name until at the very end of the chart there were 10. Those were probably some unknown heroes who were desperate to tell people they had a UA student as an intern, though it wasn't impossible for someone to have actually listened to Izuku's words. He could always hope. In recent months the world had given him some good things he hadn't bothered to even hope for before. In other years it has been more spread out, but all eyes were on Todoroki this year, though we are being careful about possible ulterior motives behind the offers. Aizawa muttered the last part barely audibly. God, there's such a big difference, Kaminari complained, slumping against the backrest of his chair. Those pros don't know a good thing when they see one, Aoyama complained. Todoroki first and Ida second, Jiro said. But they completely ignored Izuku even though he won the festival, Eijiro said with an uncharacteristically unhappy expression. The lack of a smile was disturbing. Ciro leaned towards them to talk. Some people are too scared for a guy that criticized them all and got in trouble with the number 2. People are still talking as if Todoroki got kidnapped. Izuku had to brush his eyes as he thought he saw a frown on Eijiro's face. Meanwhile Yaoyorozu looked at Todoroki, who unfortunately had his cool emotionless face on. You're amazing, Todoroki. They're probably all because of Endeavor. Might be fakes. Others were similarly thoughtful or just excited for actually getting any offers, like Eureka. She was probably just happy to have chances at earning money in the future though. Izuku leaned back to check on Tinya, who was unable to feel as excited. Congratulations, Izuku said, getting a simple nod in response. Keeping these results in mind, Aizawa interrupted the class. Whether or not anyone asked for you, you will be participating in internships with pros. At USJ you already got to experience combat with real villains, but it will still be meaningful training for you to see pros at work firsthand. So that explains the hero names, Sato said. Things are suddenly getting a lot more fun, Eureka added, visibly excited. Well, those hero names are still temporary, Aizawa told them, but if you are not serious about it. The door opened and a new voice joined the conversation. You'll have hell to pay later. Midnight declared. Several of the boys looked towards her, seeming even more excited than when hero names were declared. Izuku followed the female hero's entrance, seeing an example of the superficiality and bias of the current hero system more than anything else, though she hadn't done badly during the sports festival award ceremony. Because a lot of hero names used by students become recognized by society and they end up becoming professional hero names, she continued. Well, that is how it is, Aizawa agreed. So Midnight will be making sure your names are okay. I can't do stuff like that. Izuku found himself wondering how Aizawa had gotten his hero name Eraserhead. That sounded like something Present Mike would have come up with. As Aizawa continued speaking, he was already pulling out his sleeping bag. When you give yourself a name, you get a more concrete image of what you want to be like in the future, and you can get closer to it. This is what it means when they say names and natures do often agree. Like All Might, for example. During Aizawa's talk, Midnight handed out small whiteboards and markers and Hitachi passed some to Izuku. Izuku froze for a moment before remembering to pass the rest to Tinya. A hero name? he was supposed to have a hero name. He was plotting, planning, training and preparing constantly, but that was one thing he had not considered. He'd never really be a pro hero, so it wasn't that important, but he had to at least seem like he was taking it seriously. And yet he could not focus on the hero name. Well, not his hero name at least. Izuku glanced back at Tinya, who was staring at his whiteboard, holding it so tightly it was a miracle he only shook it rather than snap it in two. Tinya, Izuku whispered. You don't have to choose anything permanent today. The name you pick won't change what you can or will do. Those are what really matters. The name only matters for manipulating publicity, your real name isn't even a secret. Right, of course, Tinya responded, and after staring at the whiteboard for a moment longer started writing something. Relieved, Izuku could finally return to his own dilemma. He hadn't come to UA to become a pro hero, so he had never thought about a hero name. There were countless names he had thought out as a child, but even thinking about those made him want to vomit. All of them included either the word all or might in some form. Personally, he didn't care so much what people called him so long as it wasn't Deku, but he had to keep up appearances and the name might impact how people saw him and listened to his words. Maybe that was an optimistic way to put it, but it wouldn't cost him anything to choose well. If he could just come up with a name that had some meaning. Hitachi in front of him seemed tense and didn't write anything on his whiteboard. Having difficulties coming up with a name. Izuku whispered. Yeah. Everything I thought that refers to brainwashing sound a bit villainy, like Mind Jack. I wanted to tell people I can help them and stop villains even without necessarily using violence, but have no idea how to do that. I have the same problem. People always talk about me stealing quirks. I'd like people to see it as disarming villains, but don't know how yet. That's a tricky question. I wish that would work. Hitachi fell quiet for a long moment. You don't think it will? Izuku asked. It might, assuming you figure out a good name, but honestly, a lot of people seem to have irrational hate with the idea of losing their quirk, or anyone's quirk, for any reason. They'd rather get kicked in the face by Tinya, or have the villains kicked, than have the ability to take their quirks exist. I know it won't be easy. That's basically my life, but what else can I do? Hitachi tilted his head back and forth, looking at the ceiling. Well, have you considered the other side of your quirk? The other side? Boo, Hitachi whispered, but the deafening sound rang painfully in his ears like it was a ship's horn on his shoulder. Izuku jumped back and barely caught his balance to avoid falling on his back. Toshi! He yelped. Everyone else in the room fell quiet. Midoriya, Midnight called, is everything okay? Yes, Izuku said, scowling at Hitachi's grin, just let my guard down. I think I just had a point made at me. Well, okay then. Do you have a name to present? No, not yet. Midnight nodded and finally moved on from Izuku, who kept staring at the brainwashing mastermind in front of him. Explain. Hitachi sighed and rotated his eyes. Everyone already knows and focuses on the fact that you can take quirks. The whole mess Bakugo started is about stealing them. Maybe you should remind people there are two sides to things. Quirks can be used for good or bad, and your quirk can both take and give quirks. Your name could remind people of that. Izuku stared at Hitachi for a while as his eyes widened. Toshi, I could hug you. Oh, that's so sweet, Izu. And here I thought bathing and sleeping together was all I could hope for. Izuku returned to his frown, but the huffing behind him exposed Tinya's attempts to not laugh. Maybe you should call yourself Sharp Tongue. Hitachi held a finger on his chin with fake thoughtful look. Not the worst, but that sounds like it could be a name of a dragon in the movies we watched a while back. I'll think about it for a little longer. You do that. Izuku leaned back. Could also use the name The Therapist. That's just for you and your boot camp survivors. I'm not planning to make a career out of it. I'd hire you. You already did, but instead of money you are paying me with your fists. Izuku was left confused, mouth hanging open. I could, he stuttered. No, Hitachi interrupted, then smirked, relieving tension that had creeped into Izuku, then gestured around them with one hand. The lessons from those fists got me something no amount of money could. Now, did you actually think of something I could use as a name? Maybe, at least I am closer, Izuku responded and scribbled ideas on his notebook. You needed something that people would consider less villainy. How about brainwave? Even Izuku's own voice didn't sound confident as he said it. I don't know. What else would describe what I do? Izuku, I have brainwashed you more often than anyone else. Yes, their loss. So how would you describe it? Izuku tilted his head, looking at the ceiling as he thought about it. Relaxing, calm, free. Usually I am always worrying about something, you know. Tokoyami isn't the only one carrying a dark shadow in him. Hitachi nodded. None of that gets through the haze when you brainwash me. It is the most peaceful I can ever feel while awake, better than most of the time sleeping too. It is the most peace of mind I can have, even more if you order me to fall asleep. It's a pretty big difference compared to how most heroes defeat their opponents. Peace of mind. Hitachi muttered. Izuku could almost see gears turning in his head and shut up to not disrupt them. They both wrote something on their whiteboards. Midnight then had everyone present their names in front of the class. Eijiro went with Sturdy Hero, Red Riot. Izuku was happy to see him so enthusiastic and motivated by the hero he named himself after, but Izuku still thought Unyielding Hero might have been better. Tokoyama's Tsukuyomi also fit him. It was Tinya and Todoroki who caused Izuku some concern, as neither came up with a hero name, only using their own first names. Tinya didn't feel ready for Ingenium and Todoroki was too confused about his path. Then it was Hitachi's turn. He stepped in front of the class and turned his whiteboard towards them. Calming hero, peace of mind. Oh, that's wonderful, Midnight said. You are trying to highlight how nonviolent your quirk is. Hitachi held the back of his neck, looking down at the whiteboard. One of the biggest reasons I started to want to become a hero was to show that my quirk isn't villainous just because people are creeped out by it. I want to remind people quirks have more than the surface people see or think about first. That what really matters is what you use them for, and I think one of the things heroes need to do is to give people peace of mind, not having to live in fear. How insightful. Midnight cheered and pulled Hitachi into a hug so suddenly Izuku's arm jolted before he stopped himself from jumping at her. She might have pressed Hitachi's face to her chest that was thick enough to choke a man, but somehow that wasn't enough to press Izuku's big red friend is in danger button. Several of their classmates cheered before moving to laughing. Somewhere not at UA, a short, perverted teenager with balls for hair felt like he was stabbed in the heart and was missing something his life was supposed to have, if only things had gone differently somehow. Lastly, it was Izuku's turn. He stood in front of the classroom. I'm really not sure about this. I might have thought about the meanings too deeply, but the basic point is the same as with Toshi. He turned the whiteboard. Kuru, and maybe giving hero or something. I'm not sure yet, since I wouldn't be giving quirks to the villains I fought. If nothing else, it should remind people my quirk doesn't only take. I'm happy to see you have understood the meaning a name can have and were inspired by something meaningful in coming up with your own, Midnight declared. There was a polite knock on the door. The door opened to a seemingly empty corridor, until everyone looked down to see their tiny principal. My apologies for interrupting your lesson, but I'm afraid I have to borrow young Todoroki for rest of the afternoon. Izuku nodded, having somehow woken up, gotten out of his sleeping bag, and stood up straight despite having been seemingly asleep last time Izuku looked in his direction. The teacher looked at Todoroki with a softer gaze. For once his voice wasn't tired or commanding but soft, his words a request more than an order. Go with the principal. He will help you sort out your current situation. Todoroki had tensed from the moment Nizu first mentioned his name and now did his best to avoid his or Aizawa's gaze as his eyes went through 5 other people in the room. A few seconds later he finally got up, though hesitantly. Izuku flinched forward from his spot in front of the class. Stay where you are, Midoriya, Aizawa said behind him, tiredness creeping back into his voice. The attention of the whole class was now on Izuku. You need not worry, Nizu said, cheerier than seemed appropriate. For security reasons Endeavor has not been allowed within school premises and is only represented by proxy in discussions that are going to happen. Izuku eased a little, but reached into his pocket and lifted a hand outstretched towards Todoroki as he walked past, handing him a business card. You shouldn't let anyone else speak for you, but if you need to, don't trust anyone they push on you, Izuku said as Todoroki took the card. Both Aizawa and Nizu seemed suddenly tense like they were facing danger. Aizawa waited a moment in silence after Todoroki and Nizu left. We'll have a break before the second half of afternoon hero classes. You can look through your internship offers which have been emailed to you in the meantime. I doubt you can focus on studying before having a chance to look at them. After the break we are going to be analyzing your performance at the sports festival and what can be learned from it. This will cover all the contests and you should learn from your classmates' performance as well as your own, so don't think you can slack off even if you didn't make it to the final tournament. Everyone rushed to check their offers. For Izuku that didn't take long with as short as his list was, but in that shortness it still managed to surprise him. One of the names on the list was the best genist, one of the top 10 heroes. For any other student that would have been the opportunity of a lifetime, but for Izuku it only rang alarm bells. Why would this top hero be interested in him? Sure. He won the tournament and best genist might just be ignoring the other things that scared people away, but someone in genist's position could have had anyone. In terms of risks especially to his reputation, picking Izuku might be riskier to the pro than picking Bakugo if the walking ammo dump had not been kicked out of UA, unless he thought he could change and manipulate Izuku. If that was the case, he'd be dearly disappointed. Izuku already had 2 masterminds pulling his strings daily that didn't even need their quirks to do so. He did not intend to add a third. How does it look like? Hitachi asked Izuku. Izuku was still cheered up by how many offers the brainwasher had gotten despite people's biases. Izuku turned his phone to show the offer. Oh, that's surprising. Hitachi paused. Do you think it's genuine? Don't know. Should probably check how close he is to a certain garbage fire, but it doesn't seem like I have any better options. Good idea. Not like a better opportunity is going to just fall on your lap. Probably not, though if a Nostradamus like you says so. Are you still going on that? Izuku smiled. What do your offers look like? Didn't read through all of them yet, but I don't really know most of those I did. Most seem to be less known heroes. That could be a good thing. People with flashy quirks often get to the top. Those people don't know about might understand your situation better. You mean like Eraserhead? Aizawa. Izuku asked to be sure. Yes. We've had time to talk while he has taught me to use the capture weapon, thanks for that by the way. He glanced at Izuku's hand that thankfully had suffered no permanent scarring. Never do it again. You know I will if there is an opportunity, Izuku said with no hesitation or joke in his voice. Yes, that's what I am worried about, Hitachi said and waited a moment, but Izuku gave no reaction besides a look that said Hitachi couldn't change his mind in this. Finally Hitachi gave up. He keeps reminding me of all of the situations where I cannot take someone head on because of their power and pushes me to think around possible opponents' strengths. It's hard since I can't erase their quirks like him to make it a fair fight. If the fight is fair, you have already done something wrong, especially with your quirks. Yes, he said that too. You should see if any of the heroes making offers to you have non-physical quirk and made it work. If not, then you might consider picking whoever is best at hand-to-hand combat without having a quirk for that. Sounds smart. Hold on. Hitachi raised his phone in front of Izuku's face. Am I reading this right? Best genist. Izuku wondered. You too? Yeah, seems he is making 2 offers. Suspicious, Izuku said, but I can't think of a better option. Hitachi finished the sentence. If he thinks he can convince you to change your mind on Endeavor, or anything, I want to be in the audience. Oh, gee, thanks so much. And be there afterwards when you stop pretending to be okay, Hitachi whispered. Thank you, Izuku whispered back without the previous sarcasm. For those of you wondering about Izuku's and Hitachi's names, as I would. Coming up with both of them was greatly helped, largely done, by my proofreader going by 3D Phantom. Below are her explanation/justification in terms of the names that were chosen. Izuku/Kuru. Kuru, I see your Hajosu and raise you a Kuru. This name has a lot going on. First, it means give, plain verb form. So,
The rest of the chapter is more or less something not really. More or less just explaining it.
just as he can take, if he wants people to consider things in a different light, such as how bad quirks can be used for good, this name would serve as a statement to the world/public about how his power not only takes, favorite, story author follow, story author. Fanfiction unleash your imagination. Well, the autumn is approaching and the heroics lesson continued with a detailed look into Friday's matches, though for certain members of the class there wasn't much Izawa could say that they hadn't already covered during the weekend between a day's training and dinner. The class passed quickly, and the school day was over. With Todoroki still missing, Izuku left the classroom with Hitachi, Tinya, Eijiro, and Tokoyami. Time for some real training, Eijiro declared, cheerfully stretching his arms above his head. Any special plans? Some, Izuku responded. For you, we can pound your quirk to be stronger elsewhere. I don't want to anger Izawa by blowing up the sports field, again, so I want you to keep improving your agility in combination with controlling your quirk. It served you well on Friday. Actually. Izuku stopped in the corridor and turned back towards the classroom door. Shoji, he called. Would you like to train with us? The group around him seemed surprised, but their expressions quickly shifted into happy smiles, especially Hitachi and Tinya. One of Shoji's tentacle arms stretched out of the door to join them. It formed a mouth. Fanfiction unleash your imagination. I would be happy to. I have heard many good things about your training. The mouth turned towards Eijiro. It is difficult not to. Eijiro held the back of his head. Heh, sorry. During the conversation, Shoji had walked up to them, shrinking his arm into its normal, yet still impressive length. Is there anything specific you want me for? Sounded like it has something to do with Kirishima. I'd like you to join for you, Izuku stuttered, but I think you and Eijiro could work great together for training. You can train attacking faster with multiple arms without risk of injuring someone, and he gets to train dodging them as he attacks instead of just taking everything head on. If he somehow got tired, if that is possible, you can use him for a punching bag. It just trains his quirk. Sounds great, Eijiro gave thumbs up. You really know what I need, Midobro. Well, it isn't anything very complex. If, when Shoji gets tired before you, we can maybe have Dark Shadow toss you around a bit, but any holes you make you fill. Eijiro smirked. Don't say it. Izuku sighed. Oh, who am I kidding, go ahead. Just more training. Izuku shook his head and smiled, he wasn't the only one. Excuse me, a meek voice said from behind them, though a voice that made Izuku's blood boil and smile melt away. Tinya's hand was holding his shoulder by the time Izuku finished his turn to see the large form of All Might. What do you want? Izuku snapped, his voice sounding like he had venomous teeth rather than nails. There is something I'd like to talk to you about, All Might said. He had some paper in his hand. Can we? If you have something to say it here where they can protect you. Izuku nodded at the group around him. He pulled on the calm mind to maintain his controlled, albeit still angry appearance and to keep his breathing even. Oh, I don't think. Izuku stared at the man harder, I hope that won't be necessary. He held up the paper and offered it to Izuku. I just wanted to give you this. It is an offer for internship. We already got those. Why wasn't it with the others? Well, this is a bit different. It is from my old teacher Gran Torino. If Izuku had been suspicious of the offer from Best Jeanist, now his alarm bells were really going off. Wasn't it enough that All Might had had police investigating him for nothing more than his quirk? Oh. And why would he care about me? More importantly, why would I care about him? That is really something we should talk about in private. Izuku drew in a deep breath. Fine. Are you sure? Tinya whispered. That is probably the fastest way to get him to leave me alone, and there are still strings I can pull to make sure of that. Izuku took great satisfaction in the scared look that briefly appeared on All Might's face. He tapped Tinya's shoulder to affirm it was okay to let him go before stepping away. All Might led him to the nearest empty classroom. The door snapped shut. Answer my questions, Izuku demanded. Gran Torino? Why? I may have written him about you. It has been a long time since he taught me, but he is still a mentor of sorts occasionally when I need advice from someone I can trust. Someone who knows about your real state. Yes, one of the few. He thinks I have failed as your teacher and... Well, at least he isn't completely clueless, Izuku interrupted. Still doesn't answer my second question. Well, I heard you didn't receive many offers and Gran Torino is very experienced. He is also perhaps the most experienced person alive concerning someone with your quirk. You mean he fought all for one and most likely holds a grudge? Probably wants to find any dirt to get me out of UA, maybe to figure out how easy it would be to kill me too. All Might backed away, holding his arms up defensively, looking way too meek for anyone as large and powerful as him. The image really couldn't fit in Izuku's head. No. Young Midoriya. He might have a history with All for One, but he would not do anything inappropriate. Like having police snoop in my life for no other reason than how I was born? Oh wait. That was you. Not very heroic. How long are you planning to keep this act going? I might, for a while longer. The sooner you stop the better. Need to have someone more worthy take your place. Izuku turned towards the windows to not have to look at the man. I understand you have had difficult experiences, but you should be careful to not fall into demanding impossible standards. Many heroes already impose such on themselves. Doesn't look like it? Then what should it look like? What? How should heroes seem like, in your opinion? Focus on helping most people rather than being famous and climbing ranks involving popularity polls. Stop using hero status as a business brand. It takes a lot of time and money to train a very small share of people as heroes who already get paid very well. They shouldn't be spending their time modeling or using their names and privilege to use their quirks freely to sell stuff and make a show of themselves. A hero would be more interested in victims they couldn't save and their families than media around him. Izuku paused as his hands twitched, really wanting to tear into the man. People seeking to become rich or famous off of a powerful and popular type of quirk just take opportunities from those who would be better as actual heroes. Aren't you exaggerating? Bakugo, Izuku said. He began, slipping closer to a rant. Only wanted to be a hero, to be the best, to be rich, and to be famous. Never helped anyone in his life unless it directly benefited him, or at least not voluntarily. Yet the way the school selects students rated him second best, remember. Our class is still short one because he was given a seat and whoever really belonged here already went somewhere else, and someone didn't get into any hero school at all because of it. I can only hope the rest stay on a decent path, or at least those that are on it. There are more going down the right path than I feared. So, All Might said clearly, still thinking about what he was saying. Considering your view of what a real hero is, who would you say is closest to it? Izuku raised his eyebrows, suddenly highly aware. He got the feeling this was more than just challenging his earlier words, something in the way All Might said it. He leaned on the calm mind more, even at the risk of seeming suspicious. With the quirk restraining his emotions, he could finally glance back at All Might. What do you mean? You think some students in your class can be worthy heroes, even as you see it? Who is closest to that ideal? If one of them became the next number symbol of peace, who would do it best? Having used calm mind, Izuku's jaw didn't drop from the suggestive question, but he had also focused his focus on coming up with an answer even if the risk started gnawing at the back of his mind. He stared at the window with empty eyes, thinking. I understand you might want to answer young Shinso or Ida, but please consider beyond your persona dash. Ei. Eijiro, Izuku interrupted. Young Kirishima. Yes, no doubt about it. If this country's peace must rest on one man's shoulders, which I still say is a stupid idea in and of itself, then, well. I can't think of anyone better. I didn't expect you to respond so quickly. A week ago, I might not have, or at least not as quickly. So why? A couple of reasons, Izuku hummed. First goes back to why he wants to be a hero. How should I put it? All of them want to help people, but there are also other reasons that guide them, nothing as selfish as money or fame, at least among those I could even consider, but still. Tina feels pressure to keep up the family name, literally with the name Ingenium now. Toshi wants to show people quirks like his can be heroic, which is actually something the country really needs, but still bit of a distraction, a good one, but not the absolute best. Todoroki doesn't even know what he wants or why anymore, since he always made his choices based on what his father wanted. Not sure about Tokoyami and Shoji. Haven't spent enough time with them yet, but Dark Shadow is more interested in protecting Tokoyami than anyone or everyone else. On that note, I'm definitely not in the contest myself. Izuku paused. He was starting to hesitate on talking about this to All Might anymore, but it was already too late, and calm mind did wonders to block random worries and feelings. Eijiro, he appears to want to save people, nothing more and no less, and it doesn't seem to be just lip service either. A lot of people want to be the strongest, most famous, best at this or that, or just number one in general. He just doesn't want to be too weak to save someone in need, and that drives him to train even harder than those who want to be the best. I don't think he has ever been anything but excited for training, any training, at school or elsewhere. Toshi at least jokes about the boot camp before doing the training, but not Eijiro. If it was up to him, we'd start training before I even have a chance to suggest it. I see. I think I understand what you mean. It is about pureness of the motivation. Yes, it impacts so many choices that people make. If you are motivated by personal benefits, you are not going to truly risk them, risk yourself, to save someone else, and that is one of the fundamentals of a real hero. Without that you only have someone who is somewhat helpful as long as things don't get too dangerous, at least for pay. That's why it might be the most important and often biggest failure for most people that call themselves heroes, Izuku concluded. But not the only one. People fail at a lot of things, but if you want to know why Eijiro would be a good hero, Izuku stopped to look for the words. You should have noticed it already. He has this presence, I guess you could say, in the way he smiles. All Might's eyes widened a bit, his mouth hanging a little open as there was a disruption in his breathing. With Izuku's quirk-enhanced focus it was natural to strike at that. You are famous for smiling in every situation, and for talking about smiling in the face of danger, but really it is just an arrogant smirk. It only works on people because of the shiny image, because of how powerful you are and because people believe that power is unbeatable. If anything makes people see past that ideal illusion, it will turn into nothing but an expression of arrogance from a man who thinks he is better than others just by being powerful. You don't have much reason to trust me on anything, but you should trust me on that. And how is this related to young Kirishima? All Might asked with an annoyed frown creeping onto his face. Because he does it right, Izuku responded. He isn't being arrogant or overconfident, more like the opposite. He's not telling people I am better than you so don't worry, but he still makes you feel at ease, and not just in battle. I'm not sure I understand exactly what you are going for. The best I can put it is that your smile says, I am here, and assumes that is good enough, but his says, everything will be okay. The okay doesn't even need to be his doing. He can still make you believe it, or just feel better when everything else is going wrong. There isn't arrogance, just optimism. I hope you get the difference. At least All Might's earlier frown had melted away and he was brushing his chin deep in thought. Izuku tilted his head, looking at the man's expressions. Any of them can be fine heroes, but if you want a symbol that can smile people into feeling safe there really aren't better alternatives, at least not in this school, yourself included. Really, I should just take your quirk and give it to EI before you kick the bucket. I see. You have given me something to think about. Assuming you can do that. The frown returned on All Might's face. Now young Midoriya. Was there anything else? Izuku interrupted. About Gran Torino's offer. My answer is still no. I'd rather deal with best genist with Toshi than play games with you and your old teacher. All Might opened his mouth to say something annoying. Don't think I'm too busy with endeavor to not expose dirt on you too. Very well. But you should still reconsider, and I will consider your words too. Izuku didn't turn away from the window, only following the supposed hero's movements through a faint reflection. Izuku's hand was already pressed against the window sill. Thankfully the gorilla of a man decided to finally make his exit, leaving Izuku behind wondering what just happened. His whole quirk-enhanced focus had been on the man and their conversation, leaving him briefly in a vacuum before he let his focus loosen. He stumbled towards the nearest chair. Tears made their way into his eyes, but he wasn't sure what previously suppressed feelings had caused them. Memories of his mother that came up every time he saw All Might, or talking about those that waited outside. Right. Them. All Might had left the door open. Guys. He called, his voice breaking a little. At least he reached the chair, leaning on the backrest as the world returned around him with full force. Time to go, he faintly heard Hitashi's voice. Shoji, sorry, can you stay back a bit? I'm not sure you are, well, close enough yet. There was a brief pause and some indistinguishable voice. Yes you, apparently especially you. Hitachi stepped in first, dragging Eijiro from his sleeve with Tinya and Tokoyami following them. Dark shadows stretched over all of them to reach Izuku first. Hey, you okay? You look like you got hit by a spotlight. Dealing with All Might is always hard on him, even without all the other things, Hitachi said and brought an arm around Izuku's, taking the chair's place as support. He nodded past Izuku. Another hand landed on Izuku's back. Are those things really true? About All Might or that other guy investigating or, wanting to kill Izuku? Eijiro asked, or that all something? All for one, Tinya corrected. He's the only other person known to have a quirk like Izuku's. He was a big-time villain in the past. Oh, Eijiro said. Izuku was finally returning to the present moment and blinked a couple of times. He spoke as soon as he was physically able to. What are you talking about? It sounds like. We heard everything, Hitachi said. Well, Shoji did, but he repeated every word to us. Really? Izuku asked, trying to decide how to feel about it. Don't be angry at him, Hitachi said. It was my idea. Oh. The six-arm made two new mouths to repeat what each of you said, Dark Shadow added. Izuku drew a deep breath. So, you heard everything. Pretty much, Hitachi confirmed. Why, yeah, Eijiro stuttered. Izuku turned from Hitachi to look at Eijiro on his other side. Both of them tensed as they met each other's gaze. Both said pretty much the same thing, but despite Eijiro being mainly embarrassed and concerned, Izuku's lip twitched upwards, and his heart beat a little slower. Eijiro was very taken aback by what you said, Hitachi snickered and Izuku could hear the smirk without turning to look. You'll be happy to know you were right about the lack of overconfidence. Good thing the rest seemed to be true too. I think you made a good choice. Yeah, Izuku nodded, still in a friendly staring contest with Eijiro. So you were serious? Eijiro finally got entire words out. Absolutely, Izuku responded. Now being a bit steadier on his feet, he straightened up, being let go by Hitachi as he fully turned towards Eijiro, every word. Eijiro turned his face away. I think you are wrong. I'm not. No, and trying to refuse it only makes me more convinced about that. I just want to help people. Exactly. Weren't you listening? We were, but I don't know what to say. What should I even do? Just keep being yourself.
Okay.